Good morning, children. How are you all? I hope all of you are fine and safe inside your homes, washing hands using sanitizers and not going out. So, now today we are going to start with second chapter in geography, that is globe, latitudes and longitudes. I repeat, we are going to start with second chapter geography, that is globe, latitudes and longitudes. So now let us first start with the understanding of the word globe. Now what do you mean by the word globe? So what is globe? Globe is a model of the earth as it is, but in a very small and convenient form. Globe, it is a model of the earth as it is, but it is in a very small and convenient form. It shows all the continents, countries and oceans labeled. So what does the globe show? Globe shows all the continents, that is all the 7 continents, all the countries and the oceans. So this is what the meaning of the word globe is. Globe is a model of the earth as it is, but in a very small and convenient form. So globe is a model of the earth in a very small and convenient form. It shows all the continents, countries and oceans, and all of you must have seen globe also. So now next is advantages of globe. So now what are the advantages of globe? It correctly represents the shape of the earth. So what is the first advantage? It correctly represents the shape of the earth. It is telling us the exact shape of the earth. It is representing the true shape of the earth. Then it shows exactly north and south pole. It shows north and south pole exactly the way they are. It shows the correct size and shape of the continents and oceans. So what is the globe doing? It is showing the correct size and also the shape of the continents and ocean. So this is what the globe is doing. So these were the advantages of the globes. So now next part is axis. Now what do you mean by the word axis? By the term axis, AXIS, all of you must be knowing. So the imaginary line about which the earth rotates once in 24 hours is called axis. The imaginary line about which the earth rotates once in 24 hours is what we call its axis. So now there are some different terms which you need to remember for your better understanding of the chapter. So now next is poles, POLES, poles. So now what do you understand by the word poles? The two extreme points of the axis are called the poles. I repeat, two extreme points of the axis are called poles. One of them will be north pole and other will be south pole. North pole will be here, south pole will be here. North pole on the top and south pole at the bottom. So I repeat, what are poles? The two extreme points of the axis are known as its poles, one being north pole and other being south pole. Next we have is equator. Now all of you must be knowing what is equator. So the circle passing through the center of the earth, the circle which is passing through the center of the earth and it's perpendicular to the axis is called equator. I repeat, this is the definition of equator and you need to remember as it is. So what is equator? The circle passing through the center of the earth and is perpendicular to its axis is what we call equator. So in simple words, what is equator? Equator is an imaginary line running on the globe that divides it into two equal parts. Equator is again an imaginary line that is running on the globe that divides it into two equal parts. So the northern half of the earth is known as northern hemisphere. I repeat, the northern half of the earth is known as northern hemisphere and the southern half of the earth, that is the southern part of the earth, that will be known as southern hemisphere. So this is what? This is how equator is dividing it into the two parts, that is northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. So this is how it goes. Now, I hope you have understood the meaning of axis, poles, equators and all those terms so far. So now we will be moving to the next part, which is hemispheres. Now what are hemispheres? So one of the two equal halves of the earth's spherical shape is known as hemisphere. So if this is the earth round, so it is having two halves, one northern and one southern hemispheres. So when earth is divided into two different parts, two equally parts, so that will be known as hemispheres. If the earth is halved along the equator, we get northern and southern hemisphere. So when earth is halved near the equator, if it is halved in the equator, we will get two hemispheres. If we have it perpendicular to the equator, that is, if we have it perpendicular to the equator, then we will have eastern and western hemispheres, and if it is half like this, then we will have northern and southern hemisphere. So I hope you are clear with what I am trying to explain. That is, if it is done half like this, then we will have eastern and western hemisphere, and if it is done like this, then we will have northern and southern hemisphere. So these are all what? So these are the types of hemisphere which we get when we divide it into equal halves. Next we have is latitude. Since this whole chapter is about latitude, it is very much important for all of you to understand what is latitude. So now the name of the chapter itself is globe, latitudes and longitudes. So today we will be covering the topic of latitudes. So now let us first find out what is latitude. One of the imaginary circles which is parallel to the equator is called latitude. I repeat, one of the imaginary circles that is parallel to the equator is called latitude. So one of the imaginary circle which is parallel to the equator, here and here, so that will be called as latitudes. Then latitudes have their centers on one common line and they have different radii. So what are we trying to say is, the latitudes have their centers on the common line. So latitudes are having their centers on the common line and they have different radii. Now you must be knowing the meaning of radii, R-A-D-I-I. So that is for radius, R-A-D-I-S. For one circle we have radius, and for different circles, for more number of circles we have radii. That is, plural of radius would be radii. So there are many different imaginary circles which are parallel to the equator and who are all having different radii. They are called what? They are latitude. So this is what we mean by the word latitude. Next we have is parallels of latitude. Now what do we understand by the word parallels of latitude? So parallels of latitudes are the parallel circles from the equator. Just as I explained earlier, these are the parallel circles from the equator up to the poles. So they are measured in degrees. All of you must be knowing that they are measured in degrees. The equator represents the 0 degree latitude. So the equator represents the 0 degree latitude. Its distance from the equator to either of the poles is 1/4 of a circle round the earth. It will measure 1/4 of 360 degrees, that is 90 degree. So this is just the information of how it is being measured. For now you need to remember only that 1/4 of 360 is, of course you might be knowing, that is 90 degrees. Thus the 90 degrees north latitude marks the north pole and 90 degrees south latitude marks the south pole. So how this 90 is derived? That is 1/4 of 360 degree. That would be 90 degrees, and from that 90 degree would be 90 degree north latitude would be that would be north pole, and 90 degree south latitude would be south pole. So this is what we understand by the parallels of latitude, where we get north pole and south pole, and it is measured in degrees. So this is what we understand by this concept called parallel of latitudes. Next we have is some important parallels of latitudes, that is Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, Arctic Circle and Antarctic Circle. Now these are the 4 different names which you need to remember along with their degrees. So now Tropic of Cancer, that will be having 23.5 degree north, so that will be in northern hemisphere. Next is Tropic of Cancer, that we have is 23.5 degree south, that would be in southern hemisphere. Next we have is Arctic Circle, that is 66.5 north of equator, and lastly we have is Antarctic Circle at 66.5 south of equator. So these are what? These are the 4 important parallels of latitude, which again you need to remember along with their names, along with their degrees, and in which hemispheres do they fall. So this is what we have got the brief about the latitudes, equators, axes, poles, hemispheres, all of it. So here in this video we have studied all the terms also, and we have studied important parallels of latitudes also. So now let us have a quick recap of all what things that we have studied today. So starting with what is globe, we have studied what is globe, axis, what is axis, what are poles, what are equators, what is equator, what are hemispheres, what is latitude, and what are again the important parallels of latitudes. That is those 4 ones which we studied lastly. So this was the recap of all those things which we have studied today. So in the next chapter we will be covering longitudes. So that was it for today. Thank you and have a nice day.